start now?
Can we start? Okay.
Okay, let me just press
sure.
the record button. So before we begin, I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Kaartik, for agreeing to this interview. My name is Shamin, and here are my group mates. We have Sinyi, Jaslyn, and Derek. Unfortunately, Chunyong couldn't join us for today, but it's okay. So this discussion actually will be used for our introduction to international business project. We also wanted to emphasize that we'll be recording this interview. Yep. So without wasting time, Mr. Kaartik, we will now moving into the introduction. Do you mind to tell us a bit about yourself and Council Lab?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the introduction, Shamin. And hi, everyone. So my name is Kaartik, and for the past year, year and a half now, I've been working with two other of the co-founders of Council Lab. And Council Lab, what it is an advising marketplace for one-to-one calls. And right now we're focusing on the startup space. So what you can imagine this is like is, say you're someone who runs a startup, and when you do this, you'd probably have a bunch of questions. For example, how do you validate your business idea? How do you go about finding people to answer your questions? Like that entire process is one which we believe not a lot of people have access to information to. And we think that if there can be a dedicated community towards answering these questions through a one-to-one call, that would be really helpful. So that's what Council Lab is. So if you download the app and you sign up, you can ask questions about the startup space. And if someone has the time to take your call, you can book their calendar slots and you can have a call with them for 15 minutes to half an hour. And yeah, that is a bit of an introduction of what happens with Council Lab.
All right, thank you. For the next question, so in your efforts to expand your company into the international market, could you explain to us what actually are the strategies that you implement?
Yeah, so given that we are an online application, once we launch the product on the App Store and the Play Store, so I guess that's one effort, launching it on the App Store and the Play Store, it becomes freely available in all countries that we select during the launch on the App Store and the Play Store. So I guess just to paint the picture a little better, on the App Store and the Play Store, you can have this checklist of all the countries that you want to select to launch it within their local app stores and Play Stores, meaning only if your geolocation of your device is in that country will you be able to type Council Lab on the search bar and will it show up. So that's one effort to make it available in all of those countries. Apart from that, we also ran like a couple of marketing initiatives on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn that focused on people's stories on how a single conversation with someone impacted either their educational journey or their career path journey. And given that a lot of these stories were shared about people's own lives, they would make their rounds around social media. And I think we can all pretty much see how that's like international, internationally that you can access that anyway. And we also did try and get a lot of people. So we're all Malaysians, the people who run it, for the most part. But in order to go beyond our reach, we would try to get people who have interesting stories from the US or from somewhere in the Middle East, in the UK, to have that diversity, so that hopefully as they reshare those stories, it would also hit their followers base, which I guess we can kind of assume comes from their respective local countries. So that's how that's some of our efforts in internationalization.
I see. Just to add a little bit more, so how many countries do you actually have covered so far?
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I think we are probably at about 42 right now. If
I
I had to
see.
give an estimated number, we're about 42. Yeah, the last I checked, I'm pretty sure that was the number.
Nice. Okay, that's interesting. So for my last question, how did your how Council Lab actually create value for itself or for your target market actually?
Right. So I guess from a value proposition of our individual company side, what we believe we are is we are just the company that creates the platform for these interactions to happen. So the simplicity of like just being able to look at someone's calendar and to see if they had opened any slots. So in the same way, for example, let's say you have a Google Calendar and you click at 3:30 and then you can add like something in your day of your calendar. It's like almost the entirely same process on our app where you just click on a certain time and say that you'd want to add an availability at 3:30, and you can choose an end time. So you can start an availability at 3:30 on a Sunday, the 20th of May or whatever, and it will end at 5:30. And each slot is 15 minutes long. So if you think about it, between 3:30 to 5:30, if you create slots between that, you'd have 8 slots. You have 8 slots. My math's wrong. I think you have 16 slots created, 16 15-minute slots created. And that means that theoretically 16 people could book you. So I guess in terms of an individual's value creation, it depends on, I guess, how much people want to speak to them. Like if you can offer very niche advice, that number goes up. And like how many people, so how much people want to speak to you, and then how many slots you have available. And yeah, I mean, if people book your slots and you accept it, and that call happens, then I guess that is the value that you create. So that is, I guess, a simple answer into how users of the platform create values themselves. I'm sorry, create value themselves, and how we as the company just provide that platform and try and simplify that process for interactions to happen as meaningfully as it can. And in terms of like the business angle, we're looking for in the future, if calls are let's say someone is willing to pay for an individual's time. So right now it's all done on the free, because we're still at the stage of like validating the market business idea and iterating the product to product market fit as closely as possible. But in the future, like once we have crossed that hurdle, hopefully, then once people charge for their time, then we'll just take a percentage platform fees. And that's in terms of the business idea of how we intend to go about that.
All right, thank you for answering the question. So that's all from me. I will now be passing to Derek for the next questions. Thank you, Karthik.
Hello, Mr. Kaartik. My name is Derek. For the first question, what are the primary and supporting activities that Consulab do?
I'd say primarily we offer the platform for individuals to have a platform to connect with each other. I guess there's no real discerning point between the primary and secondary activities, but I guess on the app itself, you can ask questions, you can book someone's time, you can request for someone to open up time slots for people to book. You can, there's like very simplistic community features that exist within the app. So let's say we have these like, when you sign up, you have to choose like what interests you have. And if let's say someone posts a question, so we also have a simple feed. If someone posts a question on the feed and that hashtag is included, then everyone who has that hashtag. So let's say I said, or I'd like to know a little bit more on how can I self-learn the math that goes into artificial intelligence. And then from there, I can choose like one of the relevant topics of my post is hashtag artificial intelligence. So then anyone who has that hashtag artificial intelligence in their profile will automatically get notified. and they can look up the post and be like, oh, maybe you can have a call with me on this. I can answer your question. Or they can say, oh, you should consider speaking to this user about it, because I believe that they would be able to answer your question. So yeah, I guess those are like kind of like the activities that can occur within the app.
Okay, for the next question, I would also like to ask if whether the firm has experienced any increased profits through international expansion or not.
So at this stage, the profiteering of the company is still at a very iterative phase. So one thing that we did test out is a tipping mechanism. So because everything is free right now, we ran a simple like Airtable spreadsheet where we would see if we would ask people for feedback on how their call went, and we would also ask them whether they felt like they wanted to buy their advisor, the person who had the call with them, a cup of coffee. But it's kind of just a conceptual framework, because imagine if these interactions happen in real life and you're going to have coffee with someone and get their advice, you would most likely pay for that cup of coffee. And what we try to replicate on our platform is to just tokenize that. So it's just a virtual concept of like, yeah, you'd buy this person a cup of coffee, but this token would stay within their platform, or stay within their profile. And it also acts as a form of validation of their quality. So for example, if I come to your profile and I see like, wow, 10 people have awarded you a coffee token, then I'm pretty sure that that is a form of like validation of your quality as an individual advisor. So yeah, that is kind of like, oh, and from that, so the coffee tokens we had were like $5, $10, and $15 or $20 coffee tokens, and then we would take like a certain percentage of that. So in order for you to be awarded the coffee token, you'd have to like kind of buy it, and then we would take a percentage of that fees, and in fact the rest of those fees goes back to the advisor themselves. So even as an advisor, you can take a bit of the money away. Earlier on, I mentioned we wanted to go into a direct payment system, but as for now, we are kind of iterating on a tipping we're still iterating on a tipping mechanism.
Okay, that's all for me. Next, I'll pass it to Xin.
Okay, thank you, Derek. And I'm Mr. Kaartik, and I'm Xin. And for my first questions, and I would like to ask if Consulate is able to leverage its service and competencies.
Sorry, leverage my services and competences. Is that the end of the question?
Yes.
Yeah, I think individually. So regarding the team a bit more, I guess I can answer it from that perspective. So my background is in software engineering. Another co-founder's background is also in software engineering, and she used to work at Facebook. Like I'm still doing my computer science in university. And then the other co-founder has a strong background in finance. Therefore, in terms of those competencies, like when we're building the app, like the two of us, the two more software technical co-founders were leveraging those competencies to build the app. So we were coding it ourselves from scratch. We didn't have to outsource that. And then given that the other co-founder, the third co-founder, is from a finance background, he was very much leading the way in terms of raising funds for the company, leading the pitches and getting the valuation sorted. Yeah, because there's no way I'd be able to nor do I have any no way I'd be able to do that, and that's like probably a piece of cake for him. So yeah, in terms of like the competencies that we have, that's how we leveraged it into, I guess, formulating the company.
Wow, that's good. And then the next question is, did your company manage to leverage on the skills of their employees, and if so, then how you?
Yeah, so once we started hiring people, we looked for people who could I guess fill in the gaps in skills and knowledge that we didn't have. So we hired a UX UI person, because a user interface, user experience person, because when we first built the app, it wasn't very intuitive in terms of like, how do you get from screen A up until the point where a call is confirmed. So there's the entire field of like the UX, user experience space, that is dedicated towards making that process as simple as possible and making the experience of the user as enjoyable and as quick as possible. So I would say like probably the UI UX person helped like simplify a ton of different processes. She probably cut down like 15 to 20 screens that were unnecessary so that people move faster. You can think about like major apps like Facebook, or Instagram. If you want to go to your home feed, the button is just on your bottom left. But maybe in like another app, it's situated somewhere else. Or if you want to get back to your own profile, then on Instagram, I think it's on your bottom right. But on LinkedIn, you'd have to go on your top left towards a hamburger snack bar. I think that's what it's called. And then you'd have to click on your picture there, and that's how you get back to your profile. So I mean, I'm not looking for Instagram, nor Facebook, nor LinkedIn, but like I'm pretty sure that's an entirely like methodical process that they underwent in order to decide that yes, that's going to be there, that's going to be here, that's the optimal position for our user base, because the user bases of like Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook are probably significantly different. And all of these are like rather scientific, I mean, it's, in my opinion, rather scientific processes to determine where exactly those buttons should be. So yeah, I mean, when we started hiring people, like we had no experience in this, so our UI UX person definitely helped us out on this. We had people coming in on the marketing side to help just improve the entire language the company was going in, like what exactly we were putting on our website, because we thought we were being clear in terms of what the company did, but then we realized we were using language that was too complicated, the message was diluted. So we hired people who came in on that note and helped like straighten out the edges and simplify the process. So yeah, when we hired people, we definitely look for people who could complement the strengths that weren't too great in our team at the time.
Okay, thank you for your answering the questions, and Mr. Kaartik. Now I would like to pass the time to Jocelyn.
Thank you, Sydney. Hi, Mr. Kaartik. My name is Jesslyn, and for my first question, may I ask, like, what is your main competitive pressure in the global market?
So I think more often than not, like startups are trying to survive themselves. So it's not really about like beating any competition that exists globally. So I guess that's the biggest hurdle. But if push comes to shove and like you'd really want to know like what are the main competitors that are in our space, I think there exists like I guess probably the most well-known one is probably LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, you can just kind of like send someone a direct message. And if you think about it, you can just ask them, hey, I'm super passionate on, I'm going to use the same example as earlier, the math that goes behind artificial intelligence, but I'm not sure how exactly to go about this process of learning. Could I have a call with you? And if that person says yes, then that's the same value that's created that we want to create on our platform. But then again, like if you think about it, like when we were interviewing people, most of the time people said that they've tried that at least once before, and it's very hard to get a response from the people on LinkedIn. So I guess that's like a viewpoint into like competitive pressures. But apart from LinkedIn, there's like Lunch Club, which does like something similar, Super Peer, Mentor Camp. So these are all other platforms where it facilitates conversations, maybe not really on the advising side specifically, and even more so not within the startup space exclusively. But these are areas, these are apps in which that I guess if they kind of take off really, really well, then yeah, there's probably no need for us to exist.
Okay, thank you. For my next question, it's about the US China trade war. So if you isn't aware, it's basically the rise of the China's economy and the descent of the US economy. So US wants to maintain as the first world's economy, and while China like wants to take over, and so to prevent overtaking it, like USA would like input like additional tariffs on import items. And so from this, like, how do you think the US-China trade war affects your company? Do you think it has an effect?
I think on the tariff side in particular, not really, given probably we're not really a goods and service, we're not really a goods company. So there's no real import exports per se, but I would say like in terms of our entire outreach strategy, we have been focusing mainly on Western markets and less on like Chinese market, even though that is a incredibly significant market. So I think in terms of that, if I would say if we put a bit more emphasis on that market, it could be worthwhile because it's a market that's like over 1 billion in terms of pure size. But just to paint a bit of context, there is always issues with tech companies going into China because you'd have to follow their legislations, and they're pretty uptight about that. And I think if you're aware, like TikTok, for example, has a completely separate app for China that is just the same. It's the same functionality. It's the same app entirely. It's rebranded into something entirely different. And I'm not too familiar as to what the actual reasons are, but that's a thing. So I think in terms of like China and the US specifically, that's kind of my take and my response to it.
Okay, that was insightful. Thank you. I'll be passing this time back again to Derek to ask the final question.
Thank you, Jaslyn. Hello again, Mr. Kartik. The question I'd like to ask to you is, what impact has the COVID-19 pandemic had on the consulate?
To be honest, I think it kind of had a positive impact because that's when people became very familiar and normalized to the idea of living in a virtual world in terms of taking calls and interacting with others. So I would say the start, because we also started to have conversations to even just begin the company during the pandemic. And I would say, yeah, in terms of like just a simple answer, it had like probably the a very catalyzing effect on the ability for the company to begin and test out the business idea.
Okay, for the next question is, as the Russia-Ukraine war was happening right now in Europe, that was affecting all living aspects, including work and studying. How do you think the Russia-Ukraine war affect the consulate?
So I think that's a pretty interesting question. I would say probably, well, given that we haven't really focused too much on, I guess, those markets, it becomes rather difficult to pinpoint how exactly it impacts our outreach. But I suppose hypothetically, if there are some questions or some particular insights that only people from those countries were able to explain and to offer advice on, and if in any way they felt like they are not in a safe space to like get on the app and offer advice because they are worried for the safety of their friends, their family, and their country, then I suppose that is like a simple take on how it could impact this. And yeah, I think apart from that, I guess that's probably the simplest impact off the top of my head that I could see.
Okay, for the last question, what do you think are some of the biggest business challenges that affect running of the consulate, and how do you approach this challenge?
Yeah, I think very simply, it's like in the end, whether there's a real need for the platform or not. Because in our idea, the reason we're building this is because we believe that the advising marketplace, the advising space is something that has been neglected over time. So it's been neglected. Like there's no, like, let's say you want to find a place to eat. Like it's very simple for you to look up Google ratings or Yelp.com. It's a big thing in the US where you have restaurant reviews. If you want to listen to music, then you have like Spotify or Apple Music. So when you think about the same thing for advising, when you just think about, oh, I want advice, in the same way as you think about, oh, I want to listen to music. So if you just think about that question, then you can, the possible
Is he stuck?
Wait, let me pause. Wait.
You stopped at possible. Hello? Stop at possible.
yeah, okay, so the connection's back, right? Just want to test.
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry about that. Something happened to my Wi-Fi. Yeah, so sorry, could you remind me what the question was again, so I can just bring my answer back there?
The biggest business challenge that affect running
Oh
of,
yeah.
and how do you approach this challenge?
Yeah, so when you think about getting advice, you can like Google something and you can see what people say on that question in general. Maybe you can ask the same question on Quora, you can ask the same question on Reddit, or like you can ask like just on like Facebook or this and that. But like there's no, but if you think about a more specialized angle of it, how can I get one-to-one advice? There's no real answer then. Because more often than not, we only get one-to-one advice from like maybe our friends or our family or people that is in our direct circle. But oftentimes that circle is very limited. And there's no like it's very hard to break free from that circle. So that's kind of like the issue we are trying to solve, and the reason we created the platform. But I think our biggest business challenge is, what if that is not an important enough idea or like a subset of a problem to solve? So if it's not important enough, then I'm pretty sure that it's not going to be backed up by the market, and it's not, the problem is not going to be solved by us. So yeah, if in the end we believe, we thought we validated and we thought in our heads that it's a big enough problem to solve, but as we try and launch and iterate the product, that just isn't the case, then yeah, you know, that would mean that the company would fail. So that is, in my opinion, the biggest business challenge for Council Up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kartik, for participating in our interview. On behalf of my team, it was our pleasure of having you here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so
Wow.
much. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Shamin, Sinyi, Derek, and Jaslyn.
Thank you,
Thank
Kartik.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.